The interaction lasted only a brief moment, yet the tension surrounding it exploded across the internet, generating more than 30 million views and instantly becoming one of the most talked-about moments of the tournament. Alex Ela had just produced the performance of her young career, pushing world number 2 Aryna Sabalenka to the absolute edge during their gripping third-round showdown at the Italian Open. The 20-year-old Filipina displayed remarkable poise, resilience, and maturity under pressure, captivating both the crowd in Rome and tennis fans around the world as spectators erupted after nearly every intense rally. Cameras tracked her constantly as the atmosphere inside the stadium shifted from curiosity to genuine excitement, with many realizing they were witnessing the emergence of a potential new star on one of tennis's grandest stages. Yet while the spotlight inside the main arena focused on Eala's breakthrough performance, the day's biggest controversy was quietly unfolding only a short distance away on a nearby practice court. There, Aryna Sabalenka, still reeling from a shocking early tournament exit, was caught on camera in a visibly emotional and frustrated moment that immediately spread across social media. Many online viewers quickly connected her frustration to the sudden wave of attention surrounding Eala, whose dramatic performance had completely captured the narrative of the tournament. On May 9, 2026, at Foro Italico, the usually overlooked practice courts unexpectedly transformed into the center of a viral tennis storm that the internet could not stop replaying and dissecting. The Italian Open had entered its most intense phase, with packed stadiums, roaring crowds, and relentless pressure surrounding every match. But away from the bright lights and television cameras, emotions were boiling over among players attempting either to prepare for the next round or recover mentally from painful defeats. Sabalenka had just suffered one of the tournament's most stunning upsets after entering Rome as the overwhelming favorite, only to be defeated by veteran Aryna Sabalenka in a dramatic three-set battle that left the Belarusian star visibly drained, frustrated, and physically uncomfortable. The final scoreline read 2-6, 6-3, 7-5 after nearly 2 exhausting hours on court, and concern quickly intensified when Sabalenka requested a medical timeout because of lower back and hip pain that appeared to significantly affect both her movement and the explosive power behind her shots throughout the match. However, the defeat itself was not what ignited the internet. The real controversy erupted moments later when cameras captured Sabalenka in a heated exchange with her coaching team during a crucial stage of the deciding set. The now viral footage, viewed tens of millions of times online, showed the world number 1 shouting toward her box with unmistakable frustration written across her face as stunned spectators nearby watched the scene unfold. "What are you showing me?" she yelled, her voice echoing across the practice courts in a moment that instantly became social media fuel. Within hours, the clip spread everywhere, replayed repeatedly by fans, commentators, and tennis media pages searching for meaning behind the emotional outburst. Some interpreted it as evidence of the overwhelming pressure that comes with being the top-ranked player in the world, while others focused on the physical discomfort she had clearly been battling throughout the match. Her lingering lower back and hip issues appeared to limit her rotation, weaken the force behind her ground strokes, and gradually chip away at the confidence and dominance that normally make her one of the most feared competitors in women's tennis. But while much of the tennis world was consumed with analyzing Sabalenka's emotional reaction, another storyline was quietly taking control of social media discussions at the very same time. Just on the practice court beside the chaos stood Alex Ela, the young Filipina sensation who had just pushed world number 2 Aryna Sabalenka to the edge in one of the most captivating matches of the Italian Open. The contrast between the two scenes immediately fascinated fans online. While Eala was being celebrated for her fearless shot-making, composure under pressure, and calm maturity on one of tennis's biggest stages, Aryna Sabalenka walked away from her court visibly overwhelmed by frustration. Her body language told the story before she even spoke. Her movements appeared stiff, her jaw remained tightly clenched, and she deliberately avoided eye contact with cameras as speculation surrounding her physical condition and emotional state rapidly spread throughout the tennis world. Sabalenka had just lost a match many expected her to dominate comfortably. And suddenly a new conversation emerged questioning whether the immense pressure attached to being world number one was finally beginning to crack the armor of one of the sport's most intimidating players. To understand why the viral footage connected so strongly with millions online, it is important to understand the enormous expectations Sabalenka carried into Rome. The Belarusian arrived at the tournament looking nearly untouchable after weeks of dominating the tour, winning 3 of her previous 4 events, including consecutive titles in Porsche Tennis Grand Prix and the Madrid Open. Entering the Italian Open with overwhelming momentum and sky-high expectations, her explosive power and aggressive baseline game had made her appear unstoppable for months, and Rome was widely viewed as another major step toward a potential French Open triumph. Instead, she encountered resistance she never expected in the form of veteran Romanian player Aryna Sabalenka, who entered the match with an entirely different script in mind. From the very first point, the contest transformed into a grueling battle filled with punishing rallies, dramatic momentum swings, and relentless intensity that seemed to catch even the world number one off guard. Sabalenka struggled early, dropping the opening set 2-6 as she failed to establish rhythm against Sabalenka's intelligent shot selection, experience, and tactical variation. She responded like a champion in the second set, taking it 6-3 and briefly restoring what many expected to be the natural order of the match, but Sabalenka refused to fade away. The deciding set evolved into a brutal physical and emotional war that stretched both competitors to their absolute limits. As the match continued, Sabalenka's movement noticeably declined, her posture changed, and her frustration became increasingly visible before she eventually called for a medical timeout due to what appeared to be lingering lower back and hip issues affecting her mobility and explosiveness. The terrifying power that usually overwhelms opponents suddenly looked diminished, and the emotional fire she normally channels into dominance began spilling outward in visible frustration. Then came the moment that exploded online. Turning toward her coaching box, Sabalenka shouted, "What are you showing me?" While cameras captured every second of a champion visibly struggling to maintain control as the match slipped away. What made the outburst resonate so deeply was that it felt different from the emotional intensity fans had grown accustomed to seeing from her over the years. Sabalenka has always competed with passion and visible emotion, but that energy is typically directed inward or focused on the match itself rather than aimed toward her own team. This moment felt unusually raw, uncomfortable, and deeply human, which is exactly why millions of viewers kept replaying it across social media platforms. Yet the most fascinating detail wasn't simply the outburst itself. It was where Sabalenka appeared to look after leaving the court, beyond the cameras and reporters, toward the nearby practice area where Alex Ela was quietly preparing for her own massive moment. As the footage continued spreading online, social media users became increasingly fixated on details in the background that broadcasters barely acknowledged and many analysts initially overlooked. Viewers repeatedly pointed toward the neighboring practice court visible behind the viral scene, where Eala's growing presence quietly became part of the conversation taking over the tennis world. Barely visible at first glance, but impossible to ignore once fans noticed it, Alex Ela could be seen quietly preparing on the neighboring practice court ahead of her highly anticipated showdown later that day against Aryna Sabalenka. While the emotional frustration of Aryna Sabalenka dominated the foreground of the now viral footage, Eala remained calm and composed in the background, methodically moving through her warm-up drills with the same focused discipline and quiet confidence that had become one of her defining qualities throughout the Italian Open. That striking contrast immediately sent social media into a frenzy. Online comment sections erupted with theories and emotional reactions almost instantly as viewers began attaching deeper meaning to the moment. One viral comment claimed, "She's not just upset about losing. She's watching Eala warm up. The future is standing right there." Another widely shared post declared, "The Queen is realizing the spotlight is shifting." Within hours, millions of tennis fans were analyzing every frame of the clip, transforming what may have simply been a tense emotional reaction into a massive online controversy fueled by symbolism and speculation. Suddenly, people began asking questions that broadcasters and commentators had never directly addressed. Had Sabalenka been paying attention to Eala's rapid rise throughout the tournament? Had she noticed the growing wave of Philippine flags filling the stands around Foro Italico? Had she heard the increasingly loud chants from fans rallying behind the 20-year-old Filipina who was unexpectedly becoming one of the breakout stars of the entire event? As the footage continued spreading, the emotional contrast between the two players only intensified the internet's fascination. One athlete was leaving the court physically drained, visibly frustrated, and emotionally shaken after a shocking defeat, while the other was stepping into the spotlight with growing confidence and the passionate support of a rapidly expanding global fan base behind her. Social media quickly transformed that visual contrast into a symbolic passing of the torch narrative, with one especially viral post claiming that Sabalenka understood the attention surrounding women's tennis was beginning to change and that nothing could stop the momentum building around Eala. That single post accumulated more than 100,000 likes within hours and fueled even more debate throughout the tennis world. As the tournament unfolded, the Italian Open had quietly become the meeting point of two completely different stories unfolding simultaneously. On one side stood Aryna Sabalenka, the dominant world number one, attempting to protect her position at the top of women's tennis and maintain her grip on the sport. On the other side stood Alex Ela, the fearless young underdog whose poise, charisma, and breakthrough performances were rapidly turning her into the emotional center of the tournament. That dramatic contrast is what made Sabalenka's viral moment feel so explosive online because the footage did not exist in isolation. It arrived precisely at a moment when many fans felt the landscape of women's tennis might be beginning to shift. Before arriving in Rome, Sabalenka had appeared almost unbeatable. She had completed the prestigious Sunshine Double by winning both the Indian Wells Open and the Miami Open consecutively, extended her winning streak to 15 matches, and further solidified herself as the unquestioned dominant force in women's tennis. Before arriving in Rome, the storyline surrounding women's tennis appeared completely settled. Aryna Sabalenka stood firmly at the top of the sport, dominating the tour with such authority that it seemed everyone else was merely competing for second place. But the Italian Open unexpectedly altered the trajectory of the conversation, not only for Sabalenka, but also for Alex Ela. Entering Foro Italico, the young Filipina faced major doubts surrounding her ability on clay courts after enduring a difficult previous season on the surface, including a disastrous Italian Open debut where she managed to win only a single game. This year, however, felt entirely different from the beginning. Eala survived a grueling, rain-soaked 3-set battle against Magdalena Freck, in which she impressively saved 9 out of 10 break points, showing resilience and composure under enormous pressure. She then defeated 31st seed Wang Xiyu in straight sets, earning revenge for a painful earlier defeat in Auckland, before ultimately pushing world number 2 Elena Rybakina to the absolute limit in a breakthrough performance that officially announced her arrival to the broader tennis world. Throughout that remarkable run, the atmosphere surrounding Eala kept growing louder and more emotional with every match. Philippine flags filled the stands around Foro Italico. Chants supporting Alex echoed through the historic venue, and overseas Filipino fans transformed sections of Rome into something that felt far less like a neutral international tournament and far more like a national celebration, rallying behind a player rapidly becoming one of the most captivating new faces in global tennis. Sabalenka witnessed all of it unfold throughout the event. She saw the swelling crowds gathering around Eala, heard the chants reverberating across the grounds, and observed the passion of a Filipino fan base that had completely embraced its emerging tennis hero. Then came the shocking defeat, not against Eala, but against Aryna Sabalenka, during a tournament where the biggest storyline was no longer centered around the dominant world number one, but instead around a fearless 20-year-old Filipina suddenly commanding the attention of the entire tennis world. That emotional context is exactly why the viral practice court footage resonated so deeply online. To many viewers, the frustration captured in Sabalenka's outburst felt larger than a single painful loss. It seemed symbolic of something bigger, the realization that the spotlight within women's tennis might slowly be shifting, and that even a dominant champion with immense power, titles, and global success could not completely control where the public's fascination would move next. What makes the situation even more compelling is that Eala and Sabalenka have never actually played against each other in an official WTA match. Yet, after Rome, fans have already begun imagining a potential rivalry that could shape the future of women's tennis for years ahead. Suddenly, the now famous practice court moment no longer felt like a random viral incident, but more like an early glimpse of something much larger waiting to unfold. For months, the two players have existed within the same orbit of the tennis world, appearing at the same tournaments, crossing paths around practice courts, sharing event spaces, and exchanging brief but respectful interactions behind the scenes, without ever directly competing in a match carrying major stakes. That reality may soon change. Eala's breakthrough performance in Rome elevated her ranking to world number 38, while Sabalenka remains firmly established as the undisputed #1 player in the world. With the draw for the upcoming French Open approaching, there is now a very real possibility that Alex Ela and Aryna Sabalenka could end up placed in the same section of the tournament bracket, setting the stage for what many already believe would instantly become one of the most highly anticipated matchups in women's tennis. Fans and analysts across the sport have already begun imagining the clash in vivid detail. The established powerhouse against the fearless rising sensation. The reigning queen of the game facing the young star many believe could eventually challenge the entire structure of women's tennis. One analyst described the possibility as incredible for tennis, emphasizing how quickly an Eala versus Sabalenka showdown has transformed from a distant hypothetical into something that feels increasingly inevitable with every passing week. The contrast between the two players is exactly the kind of sports drama that captures global attention. Eala brings the emotional support of growing international crowds and the energy of a fearless new generation, while Sabalenka carries the overwhelming power, championship experience, and dominant presence that have made her the world's top-ranked player. Their styles, personalities, and career paths could not be more different, which is precisely why the idea of them colliding on one of tennis's biggest stages has become impossible for fans to ignore. One represents the established force currently ruling women's tennis, while the other symbolizes the arrival of a bold and rapidly emerging generation determined to rise much faster than anyone predicted. That emotional contrast is also why the viral practice court footage from Rome spread across the internet with such explosive intensity. As millions watched Sabalenka's visible frustration unfold, while Eala's popularity continued surging quietly in the background, fans immediately began imagining what could happen if the two eventually faced each other head-to-head in a match carrying massive stakes. To many viewers, Sabalenka looked like the present face of the sport, while Eala appeared to represent the future moving closer with every tournament. The footage has now been viewed more than 30 million times, analyzed endlessly across social media platforms as fans dissected every expression, movement, and detail frame by frame while debating what was truly happening in that emotionally charged moment. Yet one question continues to linger over the entire story. What exactly was going through Sabalenka's mind when the cameras captured her shouting toward her coaching team? The world #1 has never publicly explained the viral footage, clarified the context behind her emotional outburst, or addressed the growing speculation linking the moment to Eala's rise throughout the tournament. That silence has only intensified the internet's fascination with the story. Some observers believe the frustration was entirely personal and rooted in the physical pain she was experiencing, particularly the lower back and hip issues that visibly affected her movement and stripped away the explosive power that usually defines her game. Others believe her anger was directed primarily toward her coaching staff, who seemed unable to provide answers or reassurance during the most critical stages of the match. But a growing number of fans believe the emotion ran deeper than either of those explanations. They believe Sabalenka